Good morning and welcome. I'm Crystal and welcome to Homemaking on the Homestead. If you're new here, I appreciate you coming by and taking a visit with me. I recently did a video on homemaking. Is it a lost art? And that got me thinking about the lack of skills that are handed down from generation to generation nowadays. And so I thought about what are some of the most important homemaking skills, things that I pass down to my own daughters. So I compiled a list, and I've decided to do kind of a little series on this, on just pulling out a few things that I think are valuable. These might be helpful if you're a new homemaker, if you've been a homemaker for a while, but you feel like you're just having a hard time getting things organized or getting things together. Also, as I go through this series, I would love to hear from you. If you are a seasoned homemaker, what kind of skills do you think are the most valuable that can be passed on? But to start this video, I wanted to read to you the scripture verse, Proverbs 31:27. She watches over the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. I think this is a great verse when it comes to time management, because time management is the very first skill, homemaking skill, that I'm going to talk about. When I got my first apartment, my husband and I did together. We got our first apartment, and I had absolutely no clue on how I was to manage it, how I was to care for it, what I was to do every day. My mom was an amazing homemaker, and she kept our house beautifully clean, but she never passed those skills on to me. She had the feeling that, you know, you're only a child once and you should enjoy your childhood. And while I do understand that completely, it does put a child at some disadvantages if they're not taught just some basic functioning skills that they can then carry on with them. When I began to raise my own daughters, I made sure that my daughters not only got to enjoy their childhood, but also learned some basic maintenance and how to run a home, because I knew each of them one day would have a home. In my own personal experience, I started out very young. I had my first baby at 18. My husband and I were dating at the time. We hadn't gotten married, so I was still living at home. I was still in high school, and basically it was just so much to take in at that point that we decided we would get an apartment together. Obviously, eventually we got married. But I remember that first little apartment, and basically I went from being a rebellious teenager to a homemaker, and eventually a mother a few months later. But I went from being a rebellious teenager to a homemaker, overnight. And I had no idea what to do. I spent hours in a day combing through one cookbook that I had. It was kind of a thick cookbook that my mother had given me, trying to figure out my skill level, what I could make for us for dinner. And then there was a store just a couple blocks away. I would go to that store, I would pick up exactly what I needed for that recipe, and I would come home and I would cook that for dinner. And that I did every day. And it was an all-day experience, it seemed like, at least. I didn't have to deal with a whole lot of clutter because we didn't have things. We had very little at that point, but I still ended up constantly cleaning up after myself, constantly dealing with messes and my own messes, and not being very disorganized. I felt like time management was the main thing that I was lacking in those early years. Time management can be a struggle for a homemaker. If you're a full-time homemaker, then you are setting your own schedule. You are setting your own plans for the day. Unlike a job where you have a set time to go and a set time that you're off, being a homemaker, you're doing all that yourself. So it's easy to let the day get out of hand. It's easy to not start the day with a plan. I wanted to share some of the things that we can struggle with that prevent us from having good time management. One of those is simply being overwhelmed. Without good time management, you end up not on top of the things that need to be taken care of, and they quickly get out of hand. It's kind of like a vicious circle in that you can become overwhelmed because you're now looking at piles and piles of laundry because you haven't been able to keep up with the constant demand, or you're looking at a stack of dishes a mile high. All of a sudden it becomes very overwhelming, and you don't really understand or can figure out, well, where do I start? What do I do? I think the best thing you can do to help being overwhelmed is to sit down in the morning with a piece of paper and write down your goals for that day. Write down the most important thing that needs to be taken care of and begin to work on those and stay focused. Whatever it is that you decide on, you have to ask yourself, what is the best use of my time? What is the best direction for me to be going in order to get my priorities under control? Once everything is under control, then you're no longer feeling overwhelmed. There are also times in life when the struggle of time management isn't something that you necessarily have control of. Maybe you got sick. Maybe you have babies. Maybe you have babies and toddlers in your house. You have things in your life that are preventing you from managing your time like you think you should be able to, because these little people, or the fact that you're sick, or somebody in your home is sick, they are your top priority. And I think those are the times in life that we have to give ourselves grace. We have to give ourselves, especially if you have a personality that struggles with these types of things, I think you need to give yourself a lot of grace. You need to redefine your priorities at that point. You need to figure out how much dysfunction can you function in. Toys spread out over the living room, a kitchen that might just need to be cleaned later, because right now the priorities are the babies. And be willing to be okay with that. But when you have the time, then tackle things as best you can. When your time is wrapped up in babies and children, and I know this well, I had 8 children, that it's really good, again, to write down at the beginning of the week. I would do it on Sundays, usually Sunday evenings. I would write down my goals for the next week. I would write down things that had bumped up onto the priority list. Like, I know there's a disaster under every child's bed, and I need to address that. So that would go on my list, and I would make sure that when I had the time and the opportunity, that I was going into their rooms with them and helping them deal with that, or having them deal with it. Just things like that can go a long way in making you feel like you're staying on top of things, and that you don't get overwhelmed, and you don't feel like you're functioning in a continual amount of dysfunction. And it also assures you that you're using the time you do have to the best of your ability. Also, I think in life it's easy for us to get distracted. That's another time management killer, is distraction. We get focused on, nowadays, our phone. You get on your phone and you hit your social media sites, and then what was going to be a 10-minute break, you suddenly realize you've been doing it for an hour. You get distracted by things in life that are not on the priority list, that don't need to be on the priority list, and to just be mindful of those things and to be watching for that. The number one time management killer that I have fought in my life is laziness. It is such a difficult one at times to overcome. You just don't have the want to. You don't have the motivation. You don't have the desire. And it's like, how do you overcome that? What is the best way to overcome that? And I have to share what my mother-in-law said to me many years ago. She said, when you look at a job that you need to do, just remember that the first 5 minutes of that job are the hardest. Meaning that you have to, in those first 5 minutes, what you're doing is overcoming tremendous tremendous barriers of laziness and the I don't want to, and don't make me do that, or whatever it is, those barriers, 5 minutes later, you're not even thinking about that, and you're busy doing the things that you need to be doing. And the other one, a lady left me on my blog a comment many years ago, and she said her grandmother had given her the saying, you have to want to do it more than you don't want to do it. So the desire to have a well-managed home has to be greater than your desire to not do it. I think in conclusion, the main thing that I want to leave with you is to be purposeful in the use of our time. Whatever time that is, whether you work and you have a little in the morning and a little at night, whether you're home all day and you are trying to organize and arrange your schedule, is to be purposeful with that time. Watch for those things that go in and try to steal our time that could best be used in other ways, and to be always checking our priorities and what needs to be done and when it needs to be done, and strive to have good time management and to watch over the ways of your household. Okay, everybody, thank you for coming by and visiting me today, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I really appreciate that. And if you are new here and you like my content, would you consider subscribing? I would really appreciate that too. All right, I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.